Connor McDavid reaches a milestone, but the Edmonton Oilers are inconsistent. The Tampa Bay Lightning celebrate Andrei Vasilevskiy's milestone as they continue to surprise, and the Pittsburgh Penguins are struggling, especially on defense. Could changes be coming in Pittsburgh? We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show a familiar face and voice for Locked On NHL fans, Nick Zararis. Nick, let's talk a little Edmonton Oilers. Let's start with Connor McDavid. 1,000 points, very fast to get there. What does that mean for McDavid, and what does it say about his career?
I think the thing about McDavid that tells you all you need to know is after he scores the goal for the 1,000th point, he had a kind of blank look on his face. And then once his teammates came over and all patted him on the head and they all came off the bench, that's when you actually saw his facial expression lighten up and like, wow, this is something to feel good about. And he always gets maligned for maybe being a little too robotic, not really showing a lot of personality or flavor to himself. But you read the anecdotes from the time he was a little kid about how much this means to him. You know, there's one that's floated around a lot since the Cup final last year that I believe it was Emily Kaplan's feature in ESPN. She had where when he was 5 years old, he asked his parents, can we write Sidney Crosby a letter to learn how to deal with expectations? Sidney Crosby was 15 at the time and still playing in the queue. And Connor McDavid asked his parents for that. So he takes it really seriously and he doesn't like the attention that comes with that. He really is only about the team results, but it means a lot. I really feel that as he's gotten older, he's definitely come out of that shell more and more and felt empowered to speak about things that matter. But for him, ultimately, you know, we talked about this back in June. It's about winning the cups. The resume is going to be there. You know, he could retire right now and he'd be in the Hall of Fame. But without the gold medals, without the cups, his legacy is not going to look the same on paper as some of his contemporaries like Crosby or like the other great Canadians like Lemieux or Gretzky.
Overall, this team's still looking for consistency. I mean, they're in the bottom third of the league in goals scored, the bottom third in goals against. The special teams are struggling. Why the lack of consistency so far this year?
So this is one of those chicken or the egg scenarios because it's both the offense and the defense, because the Oilers are fundamentally designed to outscore their issues. You know, coming into the season, you were looking at 3 new defensemen no matter what. And now that Darnell Nurse, who got hurt in the Leafs game last night, he's probably going to be good to go in their next game, but it's not certain. But they're rotating between Travis Dermott, who's been a fringe NHLer most of his career, Ty Emberson, who had 30 career NHL games coming into this season, and Troy Stecher, who hasn't been a consistent top 4 defenseman ever in his career. They've really struggled to find a partner for Darnell Nurse. They haven't really had the defensive consistency, and they get hemmed in their own zone a lot. You know, when McDavid's not out there with Bouchard, the rest of the team, it's really hard for them to get their offense going. And that's why I've been banging the drum on Locked On Oilers for a few weeks now. As much as it might make sense to complain about the defense, until the forwards get going, it's going to be, I have a little more empathy for the defense struggling because the team reinvested. You know, you take out a Broberg, you take out a CC, and then you reinvest in Skinner and Arvidsson. Corey Perry got a raise. Adam Henrique got a raise. So when you spend more money on your team, on your offense, and you take money out of your defense, you're going to expect the defense to take a step back. And the offense hasn't been there. You know, they're very middle of the pack in terms of goal scoring, as you said. And this is a team that has 2 of the 10 best players in the world, and they're struggling to score 3 goals a game. That seems like a major indictment of the team so far.
Why are they struggling to score besides the difficulty getting out of their own zone? I mean, is it getting to the point where some of these guys are squeezing their sticks a little too hard?
Definitely. That's definitely the case in Zach Hyman. That's definitely the case for Jeff Skinner. Arvidsson's hurt at the moment, but he's been all three of those guys. It took Hyman 2 weeks to get his first goal. This is someone who had 54 last year. I expected regression. Nobody thought he was going to just magically become a 50-goal guy at 31, but you expected him to be at least a 30-goal guy. And right now he's on pace for, I think, 17 goals through the 20 some odd games we're in so far. But it's weird because you asked that question, and looking at the chance creation numbers, looking at the video, they're where they need to be on the ice. The shots are decent, but they just can't get any luck. It's funny. They keep going to overtime against these mediocre and bad teams. The Leafs are a good team, but you shouldn't need to go to overtime to eke out wins against some of these teams. Like the game against the Islanders, they were in firm control 85% of the game, and they just gave up 2 goals in the third period and had to go to overtime for no real reason. They cannot score, and it's really confounding. Even on special teams, they're having a hard time scoring on the power play, which is unreal for, Bouchard was a point per game defenseman last year. Nugent Hopkins had 100 points 2 years ago. You have Hyman, who had 50 goals, and then you have 2 former Hart Trophy guys. That's the best power play in the league, and they're 24th.
Yeah. Best power play in the league on paper.
Yes.
On the ice right now, not so much. And I mean, is there a lack of movement? Is there a lack of purpose? What is happening? I mean, what's slowing them down?
The first thing I'll say is they probably are having Bouchard shoot a little too much. And I know that might sound a little jarring for some people listening who only see the stats and aren't as familiar with Edmonton, because Bouchard is a really good shooting defenseman. I believe he was second or third in goals amongst defensemen last year, 17 or 18. He's really good at shooting the puck, but conceptually, you want the default for the Oilers is always the Draisaitl one-timer at the bottom of the right circle. That's their best play on the power play. And they haven't really had that. The majority of Draisaitl's goals, I believe 13 of his 17 are at 5-on-5. So they're not getting that. So when their first read isn't there, they're really being stuck to the outside. Hyman isn't having as much success, so there isn't that tap-in backdoor play that they ran a ton to great effect last year. And they're settling a lot. It's a lot of Bouchard point shots. It's a lot of It's a lot of shots from the flanks, the outside circles that are just hard to convert. They're lower quality. And I think with time, it'll get better. They came out of the gate really slow, and I'm not saying they're out of the woods yet. I definitely think they have a lot they need to improve on. But the 5-on-5 play is getting better. And my assumption is once everybody, as you said, can loosen their stick grip a little bit, it's going to come back to them. You're not going to have this much of a fall off in 3 months, especially on the power play, because you didn't lose anyone. You want to talk about the defense or the middle six, losing Fogle, losing Ryan McLeod. Okay, I understand that. That makes sense that you're going to have turnover, and it's going to take a while for those guys to get situated. I mean, we're a month in. They still don't really know what they want to do with Jeff Skinner. He's played with basically everybody, and they can't really find a home for him, whether with McDavid, with Draisaitl, or on that third line with Adam Henrique and Connor Brown. They don't really know what to do with him yet. So they definitely are still, even a month in the feeling it out process. And same thing with the defense. They've had a revolving door of those 3 guys, of Dermott, Emberson, and Stetcher, and none of them have really emerged the best of that group. I feel that they're going to give Emberson the most run because he's only 24. He has like 45 career NHL games, and there's an opportunity for growth there. Whereas Dermott was a PTO signing, and Stetcher has been in the organization since last year, even though he was injured and missed most of the playoffs.
What about the goaltending? Right now, statistically, the backup is out playing the starter. What's going on?
So I did an episode about this last week on Locked On Oilers where I compared the way the defense plays in front of them, and the defense is significantly better in front of Pickard than it is in front of Skinner. And we know this is a real phenomena that teams play better in front of their backups. It gets in their psychology of, well, Skinner's back there, he's got this. And that's not a conscious decision, but the numbers bear that out. This is pretty consistent amongst a lot of teams. This isn't just an Oilers issue, but Skinner needs to be better, frankly. I think I forget who scored the goal for the Islanders in their game last Tuesday, where he just had to go post to post and he didn't react until the shot was already released. And Skinner just doesn't look great right now. He's very much a streaky goalie where if he gets on a nice run, he plays up. You saw it in the conference finals last year against Dallas where he outplayed Jake Ottinger. But right now, much like the team at large, they're struggling for consistency. It really feels like every game they're kind of waiting for something to go wrong. It's what happened on Thursday night against Nashville. It's what happened against the Islanders. It's what happened against the Devils last week, against the Predators the time before that, against the Flyers, where they had to go to overtime. You can't be going to overtime all the time. They have the best 3-man unit in the league in overtime, but it's not, you don't want to put that volatility in there until they settle out what they want to be. And all the roster turnover kind of explains why they look so disjointed. They're still going to be here. You know, they're in a wild card spot right now. It's very early, and they play in the worst division in the league. So they have a little bit of breathing room to make up for this slow start.
All right, Nick, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
So you can find the show wherever you get your podcasts. Over on YouTube. We broke the 1,600 subscriber mark, so we're doing well over there on YouTube. Join the conversation, lively comment section over on YouTube. On Twitter, it's at Nick Zararis. On Bluesky, it is also Nick Zararis. Thanks for having me, Gil.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Take care. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Don't forget now, if you think Justin Jefferson will get more than 83.5 yards next week, or Christian McCaffrey will run for more than 75.5 yards, cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Lightning, Josh Sperber. And Josh, some pretty good things going on right now down in Tampa. Let's start with Andrei Vasilevskiy. 300 wins faster than anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, significantly faster. It's not like it was just a game or two. He had 31 games faster than Jacques Plante, a legend in between the pipes. And he's the first goalie to do it in under 500 games, one of a very small handful of goalies to do it with just one club. And that's something that Vasilevskiy himself was especially proud of when talking about this entire milestone. So, I mean, it's really incredible. You love to see the support that he's gotten from his teammates, especially, and just a full stadium. Literally did not see an empty seat on Saturday night when he got win number 301 against the Devils, all to celebrate, in my opinion, the greatest goalie in Tampa Bay Lightning history. And, you know, he's a future Hall of Famer. He's one of the best in the game right now. And it's just amazing to see him do something so impressive so quickly in his career. I mean, he's been in the league 10 seasons now, still pretty young, still in his prime, but it still seems like there's so much more that he can do. It's really just been a pleasure to watch him and to cover him for this season.
And not only does he, end up winning number 301 on Saturday, it's a shutout to celebrate it even more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you can say that these are his two most impressive wins that he's gotten for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm honestly a bit more impressed with the 3-1 win over Winnipeg. I remember last week when I was talking about this on Locked On Lightning that, it kind of reminded me in a different sport, in baseball, of when Alex Rodriguez was chasing his 500th home run. He went into a massive slump when he was at 499. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 1 for 37 or something like that. Some awful line. And Vasilevskiy definitely didn't make that bad of a downturn, but he had a 4-game losing streak when he was in the net for all 4 of those games. And the Lightning were in all 4 of those games. There were games that in some ways or another just slipped through their fingers. And then, a week off happened. So, that's just how the Lightning schedule worked out this year. They had a tough loss to the Flyers of all teams. And then they come back and face the Winnipeg Jets in a week, the best team in the NHL by any metric right now. Vasilevskiy stonewalled them, and the only shot he let past them was a rocket of a slap shot on a power play for a wide open defender that I believe got tipped in past Vasilevskiy while the Lightning were already leading. They never trailed in that game. They haven't trailed since coming back from their bye week where they had a week off between games. And, you expect great things like that shutout from the Devils against the Devils. And that's still very impressive. But to get win number 300 in the middle of a 4-game losing streak against a team that has been dominant. And by the way, he was a couple inches away from scoring a goal in the empty net to just put the icing on the cake. I mean, it's just, he's truly remarkable, and he's truly one of the best goaltenders that I've ever watched.
One concern that this team may have right now, the scoring is very top heavy. You have 6 players with a point a game or better, and then not a lot of scoring after that. How big of a concern is that, and what can the team do to address it?
Well, I think part of that is, even the first and second lines have been flip-flopped quite a lot this season because of some injuries. The biggest concern that I have is that Lightning fourth line. Yes, those are guys that aren't going to be getting too many minutes. No one on the fourth line averages too much more than 10 minutes a game. But of all the players who've been on the Lightning fourth line, on that line, only 1 point has been scored. It's just not been, it just hasn't been that much success. But I mean, the defense has really improved over the last 2 games, leaps and bounds, just so much achieved over the course of that off week for the Lightning. And their defense looks really rock solid. The offense is going to be able to score against anyone. That much is clear. That I don't think anyone doubted, regardless of people who thought the Lightning would struggle at the beginning of the season. And in some ways they have, but they're still in a good position, particularly at that early point. But I mean, I think that, it's like we've been talking about. The defense is certainly the biggest concern for the Tampa Bay Lightning right now. But I think that it's going to start looking a lot better once they get, to full strength on the offensive side. Some of that I think can help translate to defense, because the Lightning are an offensive minded team. So even their defense is still got offense thinking in the back of their mind as well. That's why they're one of the highest defensive scoring teams in the league as well. So the defense is definitely the chief concern.
Talk to me about the return of Ryan McDonagh. He's leading the team with a +11. What does he mean to this team, and what does him being in the locker room mean to this team?
I honestly think that his locker room presence and his leadership are his biggest asset. He's still a very good defender. You can tell that, in his advanced age, he's 35 now. He's lost a bit of a step, but he can still bang. He can still get physical with anyone. He can still stop the puck. And him and Eric Chernak are just a dynamite partnership. That could be a line one defense on a couple of teams in the NHL. But because of the presence of Victor Hedman, you're going to keep them together on that second line. And it definitely adds a lot to it. Again, with the defensive struggles that the Lightning have had this season, I don't think that's been as evident or as talked about as I think it can be. But one thing is very clear. His physical presence on the ice and his leadership presence in the locker room are crucial for the Tampa Bay Lightning's success this season.
So, I mean, we've seen some really good hockey. We've seen, as you mentioned, some slumps by this team. Is this team for real, and why or why not?
I'm going to say yes. I think, I'd like to see more consistency, particularly on the defensive side and in their passing, before I really start calling this Lightning team contenders. I still think that they're a playoff team. I don't think they'll get higher than third place in their division. I think they'll be on the lower end of wild card teams, but I still think that, with what we've seen from Tampa so far, they've shown flashes of brilliance on defense. You've got a battle-tested legend of a goaltender in Andrei Vasilevskiy, who's going to be in between the pipes during the playoffs. But, with some of the injuries that they've had, whether it's been guys like Point who have missed a couple of games or some other players who had been playing banged up during the Lightning's first month of the season, once they get their guys back, I think give me another month or something and ask me this question again, because they have the talent, I think, to contend with any team in the NFL and the NHL and beat any team in the NHL. So I think that if they can really shore up their defense, make a deadline move or two to add some more depth, really on both sides, on offense and defense, I think they can be a contender. I do think this team is definitely for real, and teams should not overlook them, because Steven Stamkos or not, they've got plenty of talent. Jake Guentzel is filling in incredibly for Stamkos, and in a lot of ways, it's like Stammer never left, because Guentzel has been that good. But I'd like to see more consistency before I start calling them a contender. But the Lightning are going to be a legitimate challenge for the rest of the NHL, and I think that they could be a dark horse if and hopefully when they do make the playoffs.
All right, Josh, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Everywhere. Now, my Twitter handle is at Josh_Sperber, Josh_Sperber5 on Instagram as well. You can also find Locked On Lightning at LO_Lightning on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We really appreciate a like, a follow, a subscription if you're into Tampa Bay Lightning hockey as well. And hoping to see you guys in the comments and all that.
All right, Josh, thanks so much.
Thanks, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with quality candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show a familiar face and voice to Locked On NHL fans, Hunter Hodes of Locked On Penguins. And Hunter, it hasn't been the start the Pittsburgh Penguins were hoping for, and maybe their last game against the Sharks almost encapsulates that in a microcosm.
Yeah, that illustrates just how many problems this team has had, because it feels like at times you can see at least a decent Penguins team come out, but then it all evaporates when something goes wrong. You go up 3-0 against the Sharks, you're thinking, okay, looks like they're finally going to have an easy win for the first time almost all season, but then 3-1, you go into the third period, you're up 2 goals, but you don't feel comfortable, but you still want to see if you can get that easy win. Nope, 3-2, and then later 3-3. And then there were times even later in the third period where the Penguins almost lost in regulation. And then honestly, in the final 2 minutes, it felt like they were just playing for a mercy point against the Sharks. And it was just like, come on, man. Like, you got to go for the kill there a little bit. But then they had plenty of chances to win in overtime. Crosby almost had his 600th goal probably 3 or 4 times, but Mackenzie Blackwood had some really nice saves. They finally win a shootout, which is very rare these days. But they're such a mess in their own zone. They're poorly coached. It's been beyond time, I think, for a coaching change here in Pittsburgh. And it's just been a mess all season long. It's funny because their power play has actually been better this year compared to last year. Their overtime record is better this year compared to last year. Ryan Graves has at least been better this year compared to last year, which were all problems last year, but yet they're so much worse because they can't defend to save their lives. They have given up some of the most high danger chances in the league at 5-on-5 this year. They are a complete and utter mess in their own zone. And when the smallest thing goes wrong, it snowballs. They cannot put a stop to anything that goes wrong. It's baffling to me. And you saw that again. Even though they won that game against the Sharks, this has still been a very bad hockey team this year.
The goal differential is -24. They are last in the league in goals allowed. What's been going on? Is it more of the defense? Is it more of the goaltending, or is there plenty of blame to go around?
I think it's both. I think Tristan Jarry has had a really bad start to the season. Obviously, he had that bad start. He goes down to Wilkes-Barre. He plays okay down there, but again, you're playing against AHL players. He comes up and then he craps the bed again against the Blue Jackets. And I do think the Penguins were, again, an utter mess defensively in that game, but he allows the first shot that he sees to go in, and then later on after that, he allowed 2 goals on 3 shots to put the Penguins in a 2-0 hole. For someone who had not made any big saves this year for his team, he wasn't able to do that again in this game. And that's not good enough. I really feel like this is his last real chance to even show the management and the coaching staff that he should be on this team, because the way it's going, I don't think he's going to be on this team by the end of the season, whether they waive him or they somehow find a sucker to take on some of that contract. The Penguins might have to eat a little bit of it, but if they can somehow find a sucker to take it, that would be great. So that's problem number one. But right up there, it's very 1A, 1B, is their play defensively. Again, they cannot defend. It doesn't matter who is in their own end defensively or the forwards. It is a nightmare trying to get the puck out. Carlson, we all know that he can't play defense, but he hasn't been able to play defense for a while. Even Chris Letang, when he's been healthy, it's been a shame to see his game rot away this year because he's been so consistent for this team for so long. He's going to go down as an all-time great for this organization, but his foot speed's not there anymore. His defensive game hasn't been there either. Marcus Pettersson, for as great as he is, he's even had a little bit of a down year. Ryan Graves is still kind of Matt Grzelcyk, I think the Penguins just missed the eval there. And then Jack St. Ivany, he's just been kind of meh after a good stretch to end last season too. So a lot of the defensemen this year are just not playing very well. And the forwards are also not coming back to help the defensemen in their own zone. And that's leading to so many high danger chances against, just so many scoring chances against in general. And that's the main reason why the record shows what they are.
You mentioned the possibility of a coaching change. How likely do you think that will be? And if so, how soon?
I think right now, I've been saying this. If it were up to me, I would let Mike Sullivan go. I know he's done so many great things for this organization. I think he will go down as the best head coach in this franchise's history. I mean, no disrespect to Badger Bob Johnson with everything he did, but I think with everything Sullivan has accomplished with this organization, I would put him just a smidge above Badger Bob. But he's reached his expiration date. It's been time. I would let him go right now, but I also know for a fact that Kyle Dubas and this Fenway Sports Group ownership group, they love him. They think the world of him. You've seen comparisons from what the ownership group has kind of compared him to the Bill Belichick of hockey. They are very big fans of him. And you've seen in Elliot Freeman's blog how much they respect him, how much they care about him. And with that, I just don't know if they're in a rush to do it. Obviously, the whole fan base is ready. People that listen to our show, I'm ready. Pat is ready. Even some people in the Penguins media also think that it's probably beyond time for him to go. But I think right now, from the front office to the ownership, I don't think they're in a rush to let him go. I think if this season continues to go down the way that's going right now, I think they'll probably let him go after the season, just because what head coach survives this? Back-to-back to seasons of missing the playoffs here. You haven't won a playoff series since 2018. Heck, it'll be 3 seasons in a row of missing the playoffs. You haven't won a playoff series since 2018. I don't know what head coach survives that. So I think they're probably going to let him go at the end of the season. I would do it now, but I don't know if the Fenway Sports Group wants to eat $5 million for the sake of it right now.
Dubas has mentioned the possibility of making changes to the roster. How serious is he, or is he just trying to motivate the team? And if he is serious, who's most likely to head out?
Oh, I think he's very serious. You already saw it with Lars Eller, though he did confirm to some of the Penguins reporters that this deal had been in the works since March. They were trying to deal him at the deadline, couldn't get a taker, but they were able to get the price they wanted, got a couple draft picks back. And shout out to Lars Eller. He played very well here in Pittsburgh. I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he doesn't score against the Penguins of Washington, of course, but I still wish him the very best. He was a really solid contributor in the bottom 6. It felt like when the Penguins signed him, his legs were kind of gone. I looked like a complete and utter buffoon with that because his skating was really good with the Penguins, and he was great in any situation for them. So all the best to him. But as for other changes, I think Marcus Pettersson, the Penguins defenseman, I think he's probably going to go if the season keeps going the way it has been. I think they're going to try to maybe see if a team wants to pay a first for him and maybe plus. I mean, you've seen top defensemen go on the trade market for first and plus sometimes. You saw it a couple years ago with Ben Sherratt. I think the Penguins are going to try to spin up that PR machine a little bit, saying like, hey, this guy might be the top defenseman available on the trade market, so how will you pay up for him? But I think he's going to be available. I think forward Drew O'Connor is also available. He hasn't had the best year this year, but he was a double-digit scorer last year. If you put him on your third line, he will contribute on a contender. He doesn't make much money. I think that's an easy gamble for a contender to make, so I could definitely see those two trades happening. As for people thinking big picture stuff, Sidney Crosby's not going anywhere. He just signed an extension. I don't need to see all this engagement farming crap you see on social media. He is not going anywhere. Same thing with Evgeny Malkin. He is not going anywhere. They're not going to entertain that. Chris Letang, I know I've seen some rumors out there. I would be stunned if the Penguins traded him at this deadline or even in general. I think he's also going to go out with Crosby and Malkin. I do not see him playing on another team unless he just goes to the front office and is like, okay, I'm done. Send me to Montreal or somewhere else. Erik Karlsson, it gets tricky. The Penguins, he obviously has a big number for his cap. Not many teams can fit that under their cap right now. The only team that I feel like could make a serious run at him is the Ottawa Senators, considering that's been, you've seen that ever since they traded him. People have said, oh, he might find his way back there just because it'd be a funny storybook ending. Could see it at some point. Don't think it's going to be this year. He still has a couple more years left on his contract. But, Michael Bunting, he could be available, but I think the Penguins might have to keep him. Noel Acciari, he could be available, but we'll have to see if the Penguins want to keep him as well. So you have those players that are out there. Matt Grzelcyk, who the Penguins signed to a one-year deal, he'll be available. Anthony Beauvillier, he's been pumping up his trade value a little bit. He's been playing a bit better these last couple of games. I think the Penguins will try and see what they can get for him at the deadline. So players like that, plus Pettersson, plus O'Connor, are the players who I really could see the Penguins moving on. I don't think you're looking at any big blockbuster involving, again, the big three and then Erik Karlsson. And then, of course, if they can find a taker for, someone like Jari, Ryan Graves, they would probably jump all over that, but I don't really know if any team wants to take those contracts on, and rightfully so.
Understandable. Hunter, I know you'll keep track of things every step of the way. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can follow my co-host Patrick Damp on Twitter at Synonym for Wet. The show's Twitter is also LO_Penguins. You can find the Locked On Penguins podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Sirius XM, all that.
All right, Hunter, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guests, Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers, Josh Sperber of Locked On Lightning, and Hunter Hodes of Locked On Penguins for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we are here every day, Monday through Friday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the NHL. So don't forget to subscribe, and you'll get new episodes as soon as they drop. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.